Hello dear students, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be starting the second part of chapter 3, Ruling the Countryside. The objectives of today's class is to understand the history of indigo cultivation in India, to understand the two different types of indigo cultivation, to understand the problems faced by the indigo cultivators in India, to understand why indigo was so important to the British, to distinguish between woad and indigo dyers, to describe the cause of the Blue Rebellion, and to collect more information about the Champaran movement. By the end of today's lesson, we hope that you will be able to understand, analyze and appreciate the history of cash crop cultivation in India and the history of indigo cultivation in India. We also hope that you will be able to understand the beginnings of the independence movement that was born out of the Champaran movement. Dear students, in the last video you learned how the British put in place different revenue systems such as the permanent settlement, the Mahalwari system and the Rohitwari system in order to ensure smooth administration. You have learned about their various features as well as their drawbacks. Now, let's see how the British used Indian land to grow the crops that Europe needed for both trade as well as revenue. We shall be looking at this topic in relation to indigo cultivation. The British realized that India could not only grow crops that could create revenue but also crops that Europe needed. This way, the British could make more profits because the revenue that was collected would fund their trade, but they could also trade the crops that India grew, thus making maximum profit. By the late 18th century, Britain tried to expand the growth of opium and indigo in India. They also persuaded or forced various other areas to grow the cash crops that they required. Some examples of these are jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in Uttar Pradesh, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, and rice in Madras. To understand how this was done, let's take a closer look at one such crop that was grown, indigo. Indigo plants gave out a bright blue color that was largely coveted in England, and it was used to dye clothes. For example, if you are to look into your textbooks, you will find two examples of prints, the Morris prints and the Kalamkari prints. The Morris prints are from 19th century and the Kalamkari prints are from Andhra Pradesh in the 20th century. As you can see, both of them have a bright blue color. The Morris print was designed by William Morris. He possibly used the indigo color that was produced in India. By the 18th century, India was the largest supplier of indigo worldwide. But why does this matter? When we look at colors, we don't often connect it to a past. However, colors have a large, deep and enriched history. The market for colors was undeniably huge. Indigo was one such color that had a huge market, especially in England. But why this demand for indigo? Indigo was a plant that was primarily found in the tropics. By the 13th century, indigo was being used to dye clothes in England, France, and Italy. However, the amount of indigo that reached Europe was very, very low, which meant that the price of indigo was extremely high. As indigo was this expensive, the English cloth manufacturers had to depend on another plant called woad that also gave out a blue color. However, woad gave out a duller blue than indigo did. Woad could be found in temperate zones and hence could be easily grown in Europe, especially in Britain. When indigo started to be grown in northern Italy, southern France and parts of Germany, woad producers started to get worried about the competition and hence pressured their governments in order to ban the import of indigo. However, cloth manufacturers preferred the color of indigo over woad as woad was duller by comparison. By the 17th century, the ban on indigo was relaxed. Europeans started to grow indigo in their respective tropical colonies. By the end of the 18th century, England started to rapidly industrialize and hence cotton production started to grow. This led to a large demand of indigo dyes. The existing supplies of indigo in the West Indies and in the Americas started to drop for various reasons. Between 1783 and 1789, the total world supply of indigo was down by half. However, there was still a demand for indigo. With increasing demand and lack of supplies, Britain started to look elsewhere to produce indigo. Faced with the increasing demand, Britain turned to India. By the end of the 18th century, the cultivation of indigo in India had rapidly increased. In 1788, the amount of indigo from India worldwide was only about 30%, but by 1810, this had increased to about 95%. As indigo production increased, company officials and similar people started to invest in indigo production. Those looking for new prospects started to take out loans from the company and banks in order to invest further into indigo production. So how was indigo cultivated? There were two main systems for growing indigo: the Nij system of indigo cultivation and the Royalty system of indigo cultivation. In the Nij system of cultivation, the planter directly controlled the land on which indigo was produced. He could either buy the land or hire the land from zamindars. He could hire workers to work on his land as well. However, there were problems with this system. One of the main problems of Nij cultivation was that planters found it really hard to expand the land under them, as indigo required fertile land. However, fertile land was scattered all across the area. Planters needed compact blocks in large areas in order to properly grow indigo. In order to get the land, planters had to lease the land around the factory, which led to a lot of conflicts with the local population, as the people who leased the land would be evicted from the land. Indigo plantation needed a lot of laborers. Laborers at this time were hard to find, as they all were working on rice cultivation during the time that indigo also needed to be worked on. Nij cultivation also required a lot of investment. It needed a lot of plows and bullocks. One biha, which was equal to 1/3 of an acre, required 2 plows, which meant that 1000 bihas required 2000 plows. This was hard to find, and even if you were buying it, they couldn't always invest into it. And if they were borrowing it from other people would not let it go, as they needed it for rice cultivation at the same time. Hence, until the 19th century, cultivators were hesitant to go with the Nij system of cultivation. Less than 25% of the cultivation was done under the Nij system. Students, let's move on to the Royalty system. Under the Royalty system, the planters forced ryots to sign contracts or sattas. They also sometimes forced the village headmen or the zamindars to sign on behalf of the ryots. Once they signed the contracts, the ryots would be given loans with low rates of interest and also were provided seed and the drill by the planters. The cultivators had to prepare the soil, sow the seed and look after the crops. The ryots had to cultivate indigo in at least 25% of the land under their holdings. Once the harvest was delivered, a new loan would be given to them and the cycle would repeat. However, there were problems with this system as well. What were they? 1. The peasants, tempted by the loans, often signed the contracts only to later realize that the price that they got for the harvest was way too low in order to pay off their loans, hence ensuring that the cycle of debts never end. 2. The planters often forced the cultivators to cultivate indigo in their best soils, which they often kept aside for rice cultivation. 3. Indigo exhausted the land that it was grown on, as it had really deep roots. The land that was used for indigo could not be used for rice again. All these problems came together and started to oppress the ryots. The oppression grew and grew and grew until it finally exploded with a rebellion. Thousands of ryots blew up in 1859 and refused to grow indigo anymore. This happened in Bengal. The local zamindars and the village headmen also fought back as they were tired of being forced to sign contracts and were afraid of the power that the planters were amassing. They fought back against the Lathials, or rather Lati-wielding strongmen. In some places, they went around mobilizing riots and convincing them of their cause. The riots came together to fight back against the oppression that they were facing and demanded better rights. The zamindars were angry for their own sake, for they were forced to sign away long leases in which they would not get any satisfactory returns. As the rebellion spread, the riots refused to pay rent, picked up arms and attacked the planters as well as the factories. The women also joined the fight, armed with pots, pans and the like. Those who worked for the planters were shunned, and the agents of the planters, or gomastas, were beaten up. The riots promised that they would never again be bullied into working for the planters and they would stop growing indigo. The indigo workers imagined that the British supported their cause. This assumption came from a rather strange series of events. After the revolt of 1857, the British were afraid of another rebellion boiling in the country. When the news of a growing rebellion spread across the land, the Lieutenant Governor toured the area in 1859. The riots took this as sympathy for their cause. They imagined that the British government was now on their side. In Barasat, the magistrate, Ashley Eden, issued a notice saying that the riots would no longer be compelled into signing indigo contracts. This was mistaken as support for their cause by the indigo cultivators. Ashley Eden was only trying to calm down the situation that was already blowing up. Somehow, word got around that Queen Victoria had issued a notice saying that indigo no longer had to be sown. As the rebellion spread, intellectuals from Calcutta came down to Bengal in order to see the plight of the workers and to write about it. This is what serves as sources for the movement. This, along with the company memoirs and records, give us a comprehensive idea about what happened during the Blue Rebellion. As the British government was worried about another rebellion boiling, they set up what was called as the Indigo Commission. This commission was told to inquire and investigate into the rebellion and the plight of the riots. The commission held the planters responsible for forcing the riots to sign contracts that were not profitable to them. The commission asked the riots to fulfill their existing contracts, but they need not ever be compelled to sign a contract again. What happened after the Blue Rebellion? Well, the indigo production in Bengal collapsed, and the planters moved their business to Bihar. Once synthetic dyes were discovered, the production of indigo took a large hit, but they somehow still managed to increase production and increase cultivation. When Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa, he was asked to visit Champaran in Bihar to look at the plight of the indigo workers. It was this visit in 1917 that led to the birth of the Champaran movement. Dear students, that was that for the indigo cultivation in India. Let's quickly recap. Britain realized that India could not only be used to collect revenue but also to grow cash crops that they needed for either trade or necessity. They started to grow a wide array of cash crops in India. One such cash crop was indigo. They grew indigo in two different systems, the Nij system of cultivation and the Royalty system of cultivation. Under the Nij system of indigo cultivation, the planters directly controlled the land that they grew indigo on. They could either buy the land or rent the land and hire laborers to work on them. However, there were problems to the Nij cultivation system. The problems of Nij cultivation were: 1. Indigo needed a large plot of land with fertile soil. Large plots of fertile land were not available as they were scattered around. 2. In order to get large plots, the planters had to lease the land surrounded by the factory. This led to the residents there being evicted, and it led to conflicts. 3. Indigo needed a lot of labor, but it was hard to find as the laborers were busy with rice cultivation. 4. It needed a lot of investment as it needed a lot of plows and bullocks. The Rayati system was where the ryots were forced to sign contracts, after which they were given loans with low rates of interest. The ryots were then provided with seed and drill by the planters. The ryots had to produce indigo on 25% of land under their holdings. However, there were problems with the Rayati system as well. The problems were: 1. Ryots were forced to sign contracts. Sometimes zamindars and village headmen were forced to sign it on the ryots' behalf. 2. The returns for the harvest was way too low to pay back the loans, which led the ryots to be stuck in a cycle of debt. 3. The planters urged the ryots to use the best soils for indigo, which is kept aside for rice cultivation. 4. Indigo exhausted the soil as it had deep roots. The same land could not be reused for rice. All of these problems culminated in the ryots rising up in rebellion in 1859. They also had the support of the local zamindars and the village headmen. They also imagined that they had the support of the British government, although this was merely a misunderstanding. They attacked the planters and all those who were associated with them with spears, bows and arrows, and even pots and pans. They attacked the factories, the latiyals and the golmastas. The British government were worried about another rebellion, just like the revolt of 1857, set up what was known as the Indigo Commission. The Indigo Commission investigated and looked into the plight of the ryots and held the planters guilty. They accused the planters of coercing the ryots to sign contracts and also found out that the ryots were not paid enough for the harvest that they gave. The commission told the ryots that they no longer had to sign any contracts against their will. This led the production of indigo in Bengal to fall. The indigo producers then moved to Bihar. With the discovery of synthetic dyes, the indigo production and the producers took a large hit, but still managed to survive and expand the cultivation. When Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa, he was told to visit Champaran in Bihar to look at the plights of the indigo cultivators. Thus, this visit in 1917 started what would then later be called the Champaran movement. Students, now let us look back upon the chapter and do a few assignments together. Discuss with your friends these questions. Why was there a great demand for Indian indigo? Distinguish between the Nij system of cultivation and the Rayati system of cultivation. Look into the other cash crops that were grown in India and what kind of situation they were in. Were there any rebellions there as well? Discuss. Dear students, I hope you have enjoyed today's lesson. Please look back and reflect on what you have learned and try to find fun activities to do with this lesson as well. Thank you.